Good evening. It is 6:30, January 11th, 2022, the time and date set aside for the regular meeting of the Northern Lebanon School District Board of Directors. I call this meeting to order. Director Marlowe. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Martin, may I please have a roll call?
Yes. Bucks,
Here.
England,
Here.
Fowler,
Here.
Jasinski. Here. Murray,
Here.
Here.
Marlowe,
Here.
Erdman,
Here.
Nom,
Here.
all members present.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented with the addition of the names specifically included in item 9, please?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Adoption of the agenda is approved. Moving on to presentations. The high school students of the month for January are Brant Barr and Rachel Horengic. This award is sponsored jointly by the Fredericksburg and Jonestown Lions Clubs, and each recipient will be recognized at a future meeting of the Lions Club. The middle school student of the month for January is Haley Shiroki. This award is sponsored by the Northern Lebanon County Rotary Club, and each recipient will be recognized at a future meeting of the Rotary Club. Congratulations to all of those students on jobs very well done this month. I believe we have a new student board representative, Alex Selby. Is that correct? Alex, do you have anything to share with the board tonight? Could you, I'm sorry, could you step up to the podium? Thank you.
All right, the student council donated its profits from the penny wars and holiday dress up events to the service club. And right now we're just working on stuff for King of Hearts.
Great, thank you for your report, appreciate it. And then the last presentation for this evening, Crowley and Halloran are presenting the 2021 audit report.
Good evening. My name is Michael Crowley. This is Pam Halloran. We're your outside auditors, and we're going to go over the Northern Lebanon audit report for the year ended June 30th, 2021. You do have a slide presentation because there's a slide pack that was given to you at your seats. So if you follow along there, you'd probably be in good shape to pick up everything we're going to talk about. So slide 1 is the title page, obviously. Slide 2 kind of explains what an audit is. It explains the audit report, which is pages 1 and 3 in the bound book. The first part talks about the financial statements that are included in the report. The second paragraph details the financial statements that were audited, management's responsibilities for the financial statements, the auditor's responsibilities are explained, what an audit is and the standards that are used. We use generally accepted auditing standards as well as generally accepted governmental auditing standards, since this is a government. And whether we had enough evidence to base our opinion on, which we did. The opinion for the school district was an unmodified opinion, which is the highest opinion we can give. So congratulations. Slide 3 continues the audit report. So the audit report goes on and talks about other matters. It explains what procedures we completed in relationship to the management discussion and analysis, the MD&A, and supplemental information that's included in the financial statements. There's a paragraph about other information and it explains the procedures we conducted on the accompanying schedules of expenditures of federal awards, which details all the grants that the district received during the year. There's also a second part that talks about a report that talks about the Yellow Book report, That, and that's included, and lets a reader know that that's included as well.
There's
Go ahead.
also an emphasis of matter in the opinion because you implemented a new standard on fiduciary activities, which we'll talk a little bit more about.
Great. And slide four kind of explains the MD&A section. That's pages 4 to 14. That's prepared by management of the district. Kind of gives more of a comparative approach, so you can see the 2 years against each other. It has some graphs and charts included in there. So that's a very good place to go to get a handle on what took place during the year.
Right, it's got your budget to actual and also to the prior year. So very, very good information in there.
Slide 5 is the condensed statement of net position, kind of a bar chart. So you can see that the numbers are fairly comparative to last year. There are some differences, which we're going to go over when we go through the reports. Slide 6 talks about the first statement, which is the statement of net position. This is a long-term view of the district. It's going to have all the assets that the district has, and all of the liabilities are included in this statement. So the district had total assets of 60.8 million. That's an increase of 26.6 million from last year, which was 34.2 million. The main reason for that increase is there was some cash left over from the bond proceeds that was sitting in your cash account until the capital project was just getting going. So that cash was sitting there. As that cash is spent on the capital project, it will move into the fixed assets area. The deferred outflows of the districts are 9.6 million. That's an increase of 2 million from the prior year. Total liabilities were 102 million. That's an increase of 28.7 million from last year's 73.4 million. So again, the district borrowed money for the capital project. That borrowing is in those total liabilities. That was about $25 million. Deferred inflows are 2.2 million, about the same as last year. The net position for the district is a deficit of $33.76 million. Last year's reported deficit was 33.73 million, so a slight increase in the deficit of $33,000. And the reason there's a deficit is because of the pension liability. The pension liability is $50 million. And that's just this district's portion of that pension liability. Slide 7 is a pie chart, which kind of goes through the statement of activities. That's the next statement, and changes in net position. Kind of shows the expenses are shown there. And this next slide, on slide 8, kind of goes through the presentation of this statement. Is that the expenses are shown at the top because this is a government. Your purpose is to educate the students. Expenses are shown at the top, and then the revenues are generated through taxes and so on to be able to fund those expenses. So the district's net function and programs totaled 32.1 million. Last year was $31 million.
Very similar.
Slide 9 is a pie chart, kind of breaks down the expense side of it.
The revenues,
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. The revenues.
because they're at the bottom.
Thank you.
It's an upside down statement.
So I'll go through those revenues. General revenues were $32 million. That's an increase of $1 million from last year. Property and other tax revenue increased $1 million. Grants, subsidies, and contributions remained about the same at about $7.9 million. Interest income decreased $128,000. Miscellaneous decreased $83,000. The difference between the net costs of functions and programs of $32.1 million and your general revenues of $32 million was a decreased net position of $100,000. There was a restatement for that GASB 84, which Pam talked about. That was the fiduciary standard that the district put into place. That generated a positive $65,000. So between the two, we ended up with a deficit of $33,000 for the year. That's very small deficit when you consider the size of the numbers we just went through. Slide 11 is the first governmental statement. This is more the statements that the district uses to run the school. So this is a kind of a short view, and you're going to see some of the differences as I go through that. The first statement is the balance sheet. So we go through the different funds. So the first fund is the general fund. That had a fund balance of $4.7 million. That's an increase of about $452,000 from the prior year. So we had a surplus there. The capital fund has a balance of $23.6 million from the bond proceeds that were borrowed for the new capital project. So that's the big difference between the two presentations. That actually is a source of revenue in this presentation as opposed to a liability. So that's why that capital fund has increased so much. As the capital fund spends that money, it will now spend that, and that will count as an expense. So that will bring that fund balance back down. Debt service fund has a zero balance because there's not really anything carried there. Everything is transferred in there to pay the bond principal payments. So that's as we would expect it to be, zero and it was zero the last year. And then new for this year is this miscellaneous special revenue fund. So GASB 84, the fiduciary standard, kind of gave more details of what counts as fiduciary fund. The only thing that the school has that really counts in that fiduciary fund is the extra classroom activities. So they're separated, and those funds are taken out. So the scholarship funds are now considered part of the miscellaneous special revenue fund. So that was a change from last year. There's a reconciliation. So slide 12.
Yeah.
Slide 12 does a reconciliation of the two approaches, or it's page 19 in your presentation. We actually don't have a slide on the reconciliation. Slide 12 is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So that's going to go through the revenues and the expenses. There was an operating surplus in the general fund this year of $452,000. Prior year, I had a deficit of $551,000, so it's quite a swing. The capital project fund received the proceeds from the general obligation bonds, series 2021, in the amount of $25 million. It also received transfers from the other funds of $1.9 million and had expenditures on the capital project of $3.2 million. So there's still a lot of money. Most of the expenditures were for planning and architecture fees and so on. Surplus in that fund was $23.6 million, and that will be spent on the capital project in the future. The debt service fund paid $1,435,000 of principal payments on the bonds and $321,000 for interest and finance charges. The 2012 bonds that the district had, the A and B notes, were current refunded. In layman's terms, that's just refinancing. So you refinance those with the 2020 A and B notes, and that was at a lower interest rate, and that saved the district money. The district incurred bond and note issuance costs on the 2020 A and B bonds and the 2021 bonds in the amount of $425,000. We also received a bond premium on the 2021 bonds of $2,229,000. So that's extra money that the district received for that bond. That provided the cash to be able to do the capital project. There's a reconciliation of those approaches in your packet on page 21 shows that reconciliation. And that statement reconciles the two approaches, so you can see how they kind of tie in with each other. Slide 13 shows the trend on the food service revenues and expenses since 2007. So the statement, so that you can see that trend over time between revenues and expenses.
Yeah, and where you started outsourcing was where those two meet up a little bit. You had expenses over the revenues, so from that point on. And then this year, you had most of the cafeteria revenues were federal sourced for the COVID meals. So very little, because the meals were free. So we had very little operational.
So that fund is considered the proprietary fund for the food service. That's has its own set of statements. We'll kind of go through that. The net position increased 194,000 from the prior year, leaving a small deficit of 11,000. So that deficit has been going down. It's just down to 11,000 at this point. The statement of revenue and expenses and changes in net position is the next statement that the food service had a gain of 194,000 with general fund subsidy of 300,000. That was the same as last year. So again, the total net position is a deficit of 11,152. Last year's deficit was 205,000. That statement also that the food service also has a statement of cash flows that's shown on page 24 in your packet. And then slide 15 is the adoption of the fiduciary standard. I'm going to go through those. It talks about that and what a fiduciary is and what the restatement was for the year. So the net position increased, I think it was 247,000.
Right. Previously, your extra classroom, you had your cash portion and then you had a liability. So now that's actually moved to a fund balance portion. So that's what that restatement was. It establishes the beginning fund balance.
The next area is the notes to the financial statement. They're quite extensive. So they go from page 27 to 61. We'll just highlight some of the bigger ones. The capitalization policy of the district is note 1, page 32 in your packet. Accounting standards adopted and upcoming is on page 35. Capital asset note is note 6, page 40, kind of summarizes the district's capital assets. The debt note is note 7, that's pages 41 to 43, details the changes in the debt over the year. The district paid $1,435,000 in principal on bonds during the year. You had the general obligation bond series 2021 were issued in the amount of $25 million. The district's current refunded the series A and B 2012 notes with the series A and B 2020 notes. And there was a net increase in the compensated absences of 61,000. That's considered a liability as well. And there was a small decrease in the healthcare retirement benefits of 6,000. The district share of the pension liability increased 1.8 million from the prior year. And the OPEB liability increased 729,000. That's all shown in that debt note. Note 8, pages 44 to 49 details the pension plan. And the district share of that liability is $53 million. So that's the PSERS pension plan, and that's your district share of that. Post-employment benefits is note 9, pages 49 to 58. That details the required disclosures for GASB 75 for other post-employment benefits. That's kind of health insurance for current employees as well as retired employees. It explains the benefits available to district employees and their benefits. The liability is 5.3 million. That's up 729,000 from the prior year. There's a whole host of other required schedules. They start on page 62 to 67. A lot of it details the budget for the year. There's 2 schedules for the GASB 68, which will eventually reflect 10 years of liabilities and details.
That's the pension.
Over the years. So that's going to be on pages 68 to 69 in your bound packet. The schedules of changes in the OPEB liability is on pages 70 to 72. That will also have 10 years eventually of data to be able to look at. And the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is on page 73 and 74. That details what the district's expended in federal grants for the year.
Mm-hmm.
There's a report using government auditing standards on page 76 and 77. That report talks about financial reporting, the internal controls the district has in regards to financial reporting, and if there were any deficiencies, it explains what a deficiency of material weakness is. It also details your compliance with laws and regulations and grant agreements. Nothing, there were no findings, so there was nothing in there that we had to bring to your attention.
There's also 2 communication letters that were just kind of loose in your packet. And the slide, what slide number is that on? Took my glasses off. It explains what constitutes a deficiency in internal controls. We look at that. We look at if they'd be significant or material. So we didn't note any of those in the financial statements in the either report for the internal controls over financial reporting or internal controls over our major programs, our federal dollar programs, which is the single audit. And then there's another letter that talks about the standards that we use, any significant accounting policies. It tells you about adopting that standard 84. And we'd let you know if we had any disagreements, any trouble getting anything, any major adjustments that we needed to bring to your attention, and we did not.
So
So,
all in
very
all,
good.
a very clean audit. There were no findings. Unmodified opinion for the district, which is again the highest opinion we can give. So congratulations again. And your staff is fantastic.
Absolutely. We were so cold and they brought us heaters. That heater for your hands, great.
So questions?
Yeah, does the board have any questions for the audit? A very thorough report. Thank you for the thorough audit. Really appreciate it, Michael, Pamela. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Okay, moving on to the superintendent's report, Dr. Messinger.
A couple of things tonight. First of all, I'm going to start out by, in front of you, you should have a plate of cookies from Mrs. Albright's students that they made for you, and also a cutting board made by our students in Mr. Hoffer's class. Am I correct with that, Pat? Mr. Hoffer's class. That students made. January is Board Appreciation Month, and so wanted to take the time to not only have a little gift for you, but to also personally thank you. It's a lot of time and a lot of nights and a lot of discussions, a lot of phone calls and emails, and you guys don't get anything for that other than the pure joy of talking to me, and serving your community and the school. It is very, very much appreciated, and we just want to say thank you. And as part of my gift to you, I'm going to keep it short tonight for you. However, I am going to bring Leanne up to talk a little bit about on the consent calendar, as we spoke about. She was going to highlight anything on those reports that are on those consent calendar that she wanted to draw to your attention. So she's got a couple of notes to go over before we get to the consent calendar later.
Hello. So I'm going to keep it short because we just heard from the auditors and I'm sure we're all financed out. But I just want to let you know one thing that's actually not on your reports, but Kayla, our Assistant Director of Business, and we are always looking at interest rates. And I know, we were so happy a couple of years ago when interest rates are great and we were making $200,000 in interest a year on our money. Well, that's no longer the case. I'm sure we're all aware. But one thing that we did move is we are looking, and typically I've always kept our largest balance of our funds at Fulton Bank, and their interest rate was very low at 0.01% for the past few months. And after contacting them and talking to them for a while, we made a decision. We've moved $5 million in December over to First Citizens Bank, and we're now working with them because they were giving us 0.25%, which 0.25% still isn't wonderful, but it sure does beat 0.01%. And I just authorized Kayla today to move over another 2 million because I thought maybe once I pulled out 5 million, Fulton would come back and kind of match us, and they didn't yet. So we are making those moves so that we can at least create some interest revenue for our district. And another thing is real estate tax final payments are to be postmarked by the end of the calendar year. So I know we were watching that with the delinquents. I just want to let you guys know that we'll still have some that are being processed as they are allowed to be postmarked until December 31st. But as of now, our collection rate for real estate tax looks better than prior year. So that's one good positive. And then just another thing that we always watch is our health insurance, and our health insurance this year is at 1.9 million as of the end of December, and we budgeted 3.7 million. And last year, our total was at 2.9 million. So it does look like we're going to be higher than last year, but last year we had a really good year and we're self-insured for those who are new. So we constantly are watching our health insurance costs. And just a reminder, if there's anything that you do have specific questions regarding those reports that you received, please feel free to email me at any time and I can look into that for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Martin, and thank you for the great work on the last year's audit as well. Appreciate that. And that's the end of our report.
Great, thank you. Is there any old business for the board? Hearing none, we'll move to the public comments section of the meeting. Interested persons were asked to provide notice of public comment by 4 p.m. this afternoon. I understand, Mrs. Martin, that we have one public comment.
That's correct.
Ms. Day? Please state your name and address, and once you do so, you'll be given 4 minutes.
Perfect. So Arian's A 47 Sweetbriar Lane. I just have a couple questions surrounding Northern Lebanon's acceptance of the ESSER funds. And I know this seems like I'm revisiting something from months and months ago, but I'm just having an issue trying to get clarity on some of the things that have been brought to my attention recently. And I just want clarity from the board to make sure I'm understanding Northern Lebanon's acceptance of them. Because to my knowledge, $200 billion in ESSER funds has gone around this country to different school districts. And I'll completely stand corrected on the amount Northern Lebanon received because I don't know that exact amount off the top of my head. I wasn't sure if it was even close to $1 million, 2 million, whichever. But when we first heard about these funds, we were all really happy that the government had kind of stepped in and seemed to do what they could to help the districts get their students back into class. Because the purpose of the ARP, I'm just going to shorten it, was to reopen schools and deal with the learning interruptions that all the kids and teachers had gone through that previous year. So we were under the impression that the district could, when you receive the funds, distribute them as you all seem fit to best serve the district. But I'm kind of in some research finding that there's a few catches to receiving those funds. And that's kind of just what I wanted clarity from the board on. Because I'd like to know how Northern Lebanon is meeting the criteria to actually receive the funds. So according to the roadmap to reopen schools safely and to meet the students' needs, and this is according to the ARP, the schools are technically microorganisms of society, which requires the intentional conversations related to the sensitive topics such as race and social emotional learning, if educational opportunities are to be achieved. It suggests the districts use emotional, social, and mental health programs along with a focus of equity to help all students feel seen and valued. This is the same roadmap links to the abolitionist teaching network guide for racial justice, which teaches that America is a systematically racist nation. Now, from a very preliminary research that I've been doing, it seems like 20% of the funds that districts receive, technically they have to be designated for what they deem as evidence-based or interventions that respond to students' academic, social, and emotional needs. Again, it all sounds great, like we're giving students the support they may need, but there is a catch. It has to include free anti-racist therapy for the white educators. So here's question number one. Is what number of our current educators are enrolled in this anti-race therapy? And question two, what are the educators instructed to incorporate in their classrooms from the said therapy? We know that Northern Lebanon has stated on many occasions that the board has no intentions of adopting this equity, equality, CRT, or whatever it is that you want to call it. So the question is, if this is a requirement in receiving the ESSER funds, how is Northern Lebanon fulfilling that obligation to actually receive the funds? And then lastly, on a note, I just want to say, while we've all had a really long and bumpy road in the recent months, it goes without saying that the parents do thank the board members for pushing onward and taking a stand when it came to the yo-yoing that we all felt with the PA Supreme Court case. And we hope that we can count on you to continue to put our kids first and foremost going forward into unknown territory. So if anyone has the answers to my questions, if you could email them to me so I can kind of digest this and figure it all out, that would be great.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Day.
Glad to. We have been talking about you're specifically talking about the ESSER 3 grant. We actually talked about this yesterday. One of the caveats to it also is to survey the community in terms of their input on where to spend funds. There is a caveat about 20%. I've never heard anything about, there's nothing written in the grant that I've seen about exactly what you're talking about. However, there is a 20% caveat to addressing learning loss. Now, we've tried to do that in a couple of different ways. Dating back to 2019, we added multiple staff members so that we didn't have 28. Jonestown was stuck at 28 in fifth grade classes. We added a teacher to try to divide up the kids. And that was even before we had gotten into who's going to be live streaming and who's going to be in school. We've added virtual opportunities. We expanded V3 with the synchronous teachers and things like that. But they're also looking for, are there any, after school tutoring programs? Are there, for kids that have failed, are there opportunities for them? So those are the types of things. However, we haven't ESSER 3, while we have brainstormed a gazillion ideas, we're still plugging in things and we still have to survey the community, but I've not seen any stipulations, but we'll look into it and I'll speak with our solicitor as well, but I have not seen any stipulations to that effect yet.
Great, thank you. And if you could email us those specific questions, we're more likely than not to respond to an email. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, items for board action. It should be noted that public notice was given for this meeting in accordance with Act 84 of 1986. By notice of the president, the following action requires a voice vote. All votes in favor shall be stated with an aye or yes. All votes opposed shall be stated with a nay or no. All members abstaining shall state I abstain when prompted. Moving on to the consent agenda, Dr. Messinger.
You're just approving the consent agenda as presented.
Are there any questions? Excuse me, are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Consent agenda items pass. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9.
Yeah, we have 2 items for you. The first is a resignation of a PCA effective 1/2. And the second is the employment of Mr. Scott Kuiper, who happens to be with us in the audience. Hi, Scott, welcome. As athletic director, replacing Mr. Rizzo, who's going on to become superintendent at Williams Valley. We anticipate Mr. Kuiper will be joining us in hopefully about 60 days or something like that, correct? All right, give or take. And I say Mr., he does hold a doctorate. So I'm sorry, Dr. Kuiper. We're going to call you Scott, though, and very much excited to have you. Comes from, he's been an assistant principal at Warwick, who has a tremendous athletic program. If you could somehow make sure we have a football team on the state championship level that Warwick has, that'd be great. But welcome. We're glad to have you, and feel free to stick around and introduce yourself to some board members. We'll be wrapping up shortly, actually. So welcome.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Since this is an item for discussion, is there a motion to adopt item number 9?
Motion to adopt item 9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I'd like to first of all thank the people that did the interviews. I believe a few of you were in it. And if you don't know, Mr. Kuiper does have a little bit of a Palmyra background. He lives there and he coached there. And I coach at Hershey, and Hershey and Palmyra kind of go together like oil and water. So I had no idea who he was. And when he walked in, I'm thinking, what the heck is that Palmyra coach doing here? Because we've actually in the past had some great battles coaching football against each other and basketball. And I can honestly say that if he brings the passion and toughness that he displayed as a coach at Palmyra, if he brings that to Northern Lebanon, we're in really good hands. So I look forward to the oil and water relationship ending, and I look forward to watching Mr. Kuiper work here.
Any other discussion? The motion on the table having been seconded, all in favor, please indicate by saying yes or aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Dr. Kuiper, welcome to Northern Lebanon. Glad to have you as a Viking. And I just reiterate Dr. Messinger's request for multiple state champions, if we could do that.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, item 10, information. We do not have any information items for this evening. So we'll move on to item 11, reports of the representatives. First, we have the Change Order Committee. Director Bucks, do you have anything to report?
I don't believe we met as a change order committee since last meeting.
Have had nothing since the soil and still waiting on a final number for that.
Great. Thank you. Moving to the Career and Technology. Director Klein, do you have a report?
Nothing to report tonight.
Okay, Director Klein says there's nothing to report. IU 13, Director Murray.
I'll have to be consistent and say I don't have anything to report at this point, but good things happening at the IU as always. So check out the report that was sent to all of you from the IU.
Great, thank you. Moving to the Legislative Liaison, Director Kimball Tazinski, any report?
Nothing at this time. Nothing at this time.
Thank you. And PSBA Liaison, Director Bucks, again, anything?
Not so much for the board itself, but for any of the public listening. I just want to make everybody aware that all school directors go through required school director training. All newly elected school board directors undergo at least 5 hours of training. This is put forth by the PSBA. All re-elected school board members undergo 3 hours of training. We have a year to complete this training, and it includes a many multitude of different things that we need knowledge of to serve on the board, including things like facilities planning, finance and budgeting, legal updates, understanding the Sunshine Law, understanding conflicts of interest and ethics, as well as trauma-informed education. So just know that we don't just sit up here, we do some behind the scenes training so that we can serve our community better. And all of us should have received that information from PSBA, especially everybody who needs to continue that training. And of course, even if we're not newly elected, we can still partake in any of the ongoing PSBA trainings. That's the end of my report.
Great, thank you. Is there any new business for this evening? Hearing none, I would just note for the board dates to remember. January 17th, school is closed, and that is a Teacher in Service Day. That is in recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And February 1st is our scheduled school board committee meeting, and February 8th is our scheduled school board meeting for next month. There being no further business to come before the board, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.